It was a quiet Sunday evening when I first heard it. I was sitting in my room half-heartedly scrolling through my phone while some sitcom played in the background when the faint humming reached my ears. It took me a moment to realize it was coming from down the hall where my mom was tidying up the living room. The tune was unfamiliar, a haunted, winding melody that sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't like any lullaby I'd ever heard before. Something about it felt off, like there was a subtle wrongness I couldn't quite put my finger on. I tried to ignore it at first, turning up the volume on the TV to drown it out, but the eerie humming persisted, floating down the hallway and seeping under my door. It wormed its way into my head, those unsettling notes echoing through my mind. After about 15 minutes, I couldn't take it anymore. I stepped out into the hallway, following the sound toward the living room. My mom was dusting the bookshelves, swaying gently as she cleaned and hummed that odd, melancholy tune under her breath. "What song is that?" I asked her. "I've never heard you hum it before." She turned to me, looking confused for a moment before her face cleared. "Oh, just a little lullaby my mother used to sing to me as a child," she said with a smile. "I guess it got stuck in my head today." "It's nice," I lied. Something about her explanation didn't sit right with me, but I couldn't put my finger on why. She hummed a few more bars, the haunting melody hanging eerily in the air. "Anyway, did you need something, sweetie?" I shook my head, trying to ignore the unease still twisting in my gut. "No, sorry. Was just curious about the song." She nodded and turned back to her cleaning. Soon the ominous tune rose again, echoing down the hallway as I retreated to my room. Over the next few days, I noticed my mom humming that same lullaby more and more. While making dinner, folding laundry, watering her garden, that same melancholy melody would drift through the house at odd hours. Sometimes it even woke me from a sound sleep, the ghostly notes seeping under my door and twining their way into my restless dreams. I asked her about it again, but she just gave the same vague answer about it being an old lullaby her mother used to sing. When I pressed for details, she said she didn't remember much else about it. But something in her eyes, a sort of faraway look, told me there was more to this song than she was letting on. The humming persisted, and I started to feel unsettled in my own home. I'd walk into a room and hear the faint, haunting melody, immediately looking for my mom. Sometimes I wouldn't even see her, just hear her distant, disembodied voice floating through the halls. One night, as I was getting ready for bed, the singing seemed closer and clearer. A realization dawned on me. She was right outside my door. The lullaby surrounded me, inescapable, as I stood frozen in place. Why was she humming this late at night right outside my bedroom? Before I could ask, the song cut off abruptly. I heard her footsteps retreat down the hall to her room, the silence ringing in my ears after that musical assault. Needless to say, I didn't sleep well that night. The next morning, I pulled my dad aside while my mom was out running errands. "Have you noticed Mom humming this creepy song lately?" I asked him. He frowned. "No, can't say that I have. What does it sound like?" I tried to hum a few bars, but I couldn't quite mimic the haunting melody. "I don't know how to describe it. It's just weird, kind of ominous, you know. She says it was a lullaby her mom used to sing to her, but she seems obsessed with it." My dad's frown deepened, and he seemed troubled. "That's odd. Her mother died when she was very young. I don't think she would even remember her." A cold feeling washed over me. What did this mean? Was my mom lying about where this song came from? If so, why? Dad sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'll try to talk to her about it when she gets back. Maybe it's just some old tune she heard as a child and doesn't remember clearly." But he didn't seem convinced. I spent the rest of the day on edge, jumping at small noises. When my mom returned, the haunting melody started up almost immediately. I peered around the corner and saw her washing dishes, oblivious as she hummed away. My dad stood in the doorway, listening with a grim expression. After a minute, he stepped forward and cleared his throat. "Honey, that's a pretty song. Where did you learn it?" She turned to him, that same faraway look in her eyes. "Oh, just an old lullaby my mother used to sing to me as a child," she said with a dismissive shrug, then turned back to the dishes. "But your mother died when you were 5, my dad said carefully. "Do you remember her singing it?" My mom's humming faltered briefly. She was silent for a long moment before responding. "No, you're probably right," she said faintly. "I must be mistaken." She didn't hum for the rest of the night, but the next morning that haunting melody greeted me as soon as I woke up. Over the following weeks, the song only grew more frequent, intruding at all hours. Mom hummed it constantly, that same lifeless gaze in her eyes. She seemed to sink deeper into the haunting tune, withdrawing into herself. Dad and I exchanged worried looks, at a loss for how to shake her out of this disturbing obsession. Then late one night, I awoke with a start. The lullaby. She was right outside my room again. I sat up, my heart hammering as the ominous notes permeated my door. After several long minutes, I couldn't take it anymore. I crept across my room and eased the door open just a crack. There was my mom, face pale and eyes wide in the dim night light. She stood a mere foot from my door, rocking back and forth as she hummed, utterly lost in the music. A wave of fear washed over me. Something was very, very wrong. Before she could notice me, I quickly but quietly latched the door again, my hands shaking. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I told my dad what had happened, feeling on the verge of tears. He pulled me into a hug, looking haunted. "Don't worry, we'll figure this out," he said grimly. "I'll call a doctor today, she needs help." But when he suggested it to my mom, her mood shifted abruptly. She became angry and defensive. "I'm fine," she insisted. "It's just a song. Leave me alone." She retreated to her room, slamming the door. The lock clicked behind her. Dad and I stood there, stunned. We could hear the muffled melody start up again through the walls. He went to knock on her door to try and reason with her, but she ignored him. That night, I pushed a dresser in front of my bedroom door before crawling into bed. But even that barricade didn't block the haunting notes from trickling under the gap and invading my restless sleep. The next day, my dad left for work looking exhausted and defeated. I kept glancing anxiously at my mom's closed door between my online classes, desperate for some sign of normalcy. Around noon, the humming finally went quiet. I hesitantly made my way to her room. "Mom?" I called through the door. No response. The silence rang in my ears. I knocked, then banged harder when she didn't answer. "Mom, please open up, you're scaring me." Still nothing. A wave of panic rushed through me. Before I knew what I was doing, I was throwing my shoulder against the door. It burst open with a crack, the frame splintering. I stumbled into the room, looking around wildly. She was gone. The window stood open, curtains fluttering gently in the breeze. No sign of a struggle. It was like she had simply melted away, leaving only that open window and her haunting melody still echoing through my mind. Dad called the police when he got home. They searched but found nothing. No tracks, no clues. It was like she had vanished into thin air. Days passed in a tense fog. Dad and I kept expecting her to walk back through the front door as if nothing had happened. But she never did. Then one night, a month after her disappearance, I awoke with a start. I sat up in bed, my heart seized with terror. A faint humming was drifting through my open window. That same familiar, haunting melody. I stumbled out of bed and peered out into the moonlit yard. At first, I saw nothing. Just empty grass bathed in silvery light. Then a shape stepped out from the trees. I cried out, stumbling back. A figure stood under the shadows of the forest, so pale she almost glowed in the darkness. My mother. She wore a thin white nightgown, her feet bare and her long hair trailing loose down her back. She didn't seem to see me. Her gaze was distant, fixed on something I couldn't see. As I watched, paralyzed with fear, she began to sway gently back and forth. A distant humming reached my ears, building steadily louder, the lullaby. She was singing it again. I wanted to call for my dad, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. She looked so thin and frail, so changed. With a trembling hand, I pushed the window closed, trying to block out that haunting sound. I crawled back into bed and pulled the covers over my head like a child, praying it was just a nightmare. But the melody still reached me, muffled yet unmistakable. The next morning, I told Dad what I had seen. He went pale, immediately calling the police again. They searched the woods behind our house but found nothing. No footprints, no traces left behind. Ever since that night, I've heard her humming from time to time, always from somewhere outside. It never fails to send a spike of fear through my heart. I'll be lying awake in bed and that mournful tune will come drifting through the window. Or I'll be walking to my car in the morning, and a faint melody will hang in the air. But when I whip around, there's no one there, just empty space and echoes. Dad wants us to move, to get away from this house full of memories, but something in me resists. As unsettled as I feel, I'm not ready to leave this place behind. Not yet. I keep hoping that one day, I'll wake up and find Mom in the kitchen making pancakes like she used to. That this will all somehow return to normal. I know it's foolish, but I can't let go of that hope yet. So for now, when I hear that sad, distant humming, I just close my eyes and pray she finds her way back to us soon. Wherever she wandered off to that day, whatever lured her away, I hope she's able to follow that haunting melody back home.